Okay, guys. So we are just waiting for others to join, but let me just quickly head up to YouTube and LinkedIn. I just want to be sure the audio is working. Because last week when we started all this, the audio wasn't working, and it was half now. And this too. So let me just quickly confirm this. Then we can just start. It looks like that we are full. We do have so many people. See, just give me some. That's fine. I think that's so cool. On YouTube, and just quickly what about now? Is it better? S- Still the same. Oh my word. But just give me a minute. I will look into that now. It's doing the same on the Teams, right? Oh, okay. Okay, nice. Okay, thank you. Um, yeah, I think it's all good. I can confirm on YouTube also and LinkedIn that it's all working fine. I think we can start if you guys feel like the audio issue has been resolved. All right. I know some people are just joining this class. I know a lot of people are not able to attend today. I don't know. Maybe people will still be joining, but we are just going to go ahead from where we stopped last week. We were able to talk about the architectural component of Azure, where I explained what a region is, region pair. We talked about availability sets, availability zones, and some other components. So today we are going to start with storage after we've also discussed compute last week. We're going to start with storage. But before I go ahead, if you guys have got any question you want to ask me before I go ahead, please do ask me. Inandi, I feel like this is your first class. Um, the good thing is we've got recordings of the other ones on, the YouTube channel and also on the LinkedIn. If you have time, you can go back. But just we are still on fundamental, so you have not really missed a lot. Everything we've discussed, everything we are still going to be discussing in this particular class is what we're still going to, start discussing when we get to the fundamental class, the administrator class. The only thing is we are just going to go in depth, than what we are currently discussing because now it's just more of the on the surface discussion. Yeah, Kyle, I can see your hand up. Yeah, Mr. Kyle, are you there? Okay. If not, Nandi, are you there? If you want to unmute your mic, you can just go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it is free. It is free. That's why is actually public. That's why it's on LinkedIn. If you go on LinkedIn now, you are going to start streaming it live. If you go on YouTube, you are going to stream it live. So it's free. So the benefit of joining, using the Teams link is for you to be able to ask questions, unmute your mic and ask questions. Because if you join on LinkedIn, that will be you just maybe typing in some messages within the chat option, yeah, but chat box for me to answer questions you have in there. But once you join my my team's link, then you are able to, asking questions, and the like. So it's totally free. Yeah. Okay, so they are going to be on live. That's the problem. So they're not going to show us video. I can quickly just show you that. So they are going to be, yeah. So so they are going to be on live. Uh, th- that's fine. That okay. So in this class we are not looking at just going through this to pass the exam, even when you can, go ahead and write your exam after this particular class. But the main thing is for you to have a very good understanding of the fundamental before we even start talking about the other ones, because we're going to spend lots of time when we get to the administrator class, because that's the real deal. That's where we are going to be talking about all the services, or almost all the services in Azure. You get what I'm saying? Then when we start talking, when we move to security, when we move to DevOps, when we get to cybersecurity, all those stuffs will have been discussed in the AZ 104, which is the administrator. That's why we need to really pay attention when we get to that particular course. But before then, we cannot shy away from fundamental. It's very, very crucial. It's so important, and that's why we started for fundamental. My plan was to have fundamental for just 2 or 3 weeks, and this seems like we've had this for like 4 weeks already. But it's fine. Once we are able to get these, then whatever we are actually going to be doing afterward, will be easy, because understanding the fundamental is so crucial and important. Yeah. All right. All right. I'll remove this. Who am I? All right, Kayode, are you still there? I can still see your hand up. Yeah, yeah, I can hear you audible. So VPN gateway, express route. When we leverage on services like, no, I will make it so easy for you. Just something you just comprehend at this level. Then from there we can go ahead. The main thing is for us to be able to extend our Azure environment to on-premises. That's the main thing, regardless of if you are leveraging on express route or if you are leveraging on VPN. Now, when you leverage on VPN and you have this VPN gateway, the main difference between these and you leveraging on express route is the fact that when you leverage on VPN, you are still going to be connecting or extending your network over the public internet, like over the internet. So when you have your VPN, you still need to connect to the internet to be able to do this. So you are still exposed as against the express route, which is premium, and this is connected via the Azure backbone. Like, you do not need to go over the internet or the public route to be public endpoint to be able to extend that your network. So now you are connecting via the private endpoint, like via Azure backbone environment. So the connection is actually from the Azure data center to your own network in Azure. Do you understand? Or to your on-premises environment. So there is nothing really, you are not going to be connecting over the public internet as against the VPN, which you need to connect. Whenever you want to connect or leverage on VPN, you need to connect over the internet. So those are the public the differences. Is that clear? All right. So, but But the main thing is still for you. The main thing is still for you to extend your network, to the on premises. So that's the main thing. That's the main goal. But it now depends on how is the connection made. So the connection, that's the major difference between you leveraging and but there are other differences when it comes to the costing and the likes, because you leveraging an express route, you're going to cost you a lot. It's going to cost you a lot, as against when you leverage on VPN. And you know that maybe when we get there, because we are just like I said, this is just like high level, because we have two types of VPN. Now we'll start talking about point to site and site to site. When you have just one particular machine or computer system or laptop, and you want this connection from your own environment in Azure to that particular machine on your own premise. Let's say a developer only needs a VPN to be able to connect to services in Azure, maybe database services in Azure. Now, if that connection is made from our network in Azure, like the VNet in Azure, to only that particular system, then we'll say we are leveraging on the P2S, which is the point to site. But the other one, which is the site to site, I'm so sure we all have experienced this. When you get to the office, even when you're actually using your VPN from your own system, but when you get to your office, they will say there's no need for you to connect to the VPN because you are on the office network. The fact that you're on the office network, you would be able to connect to services in Azure without you needing to connect from your own system. So just for the fact that you are connected to that office in the network in your office, then you are able to connect to those services. So what has happened is there's been a VPN connection, which we call the site to site, that has been connected from the network in Azure to the office network. So we'll have some VPN appliances on the on-premises environment also that will make this connection happen. Do you get? So we are still going to be discussing a lot about the types of VPN, where we still discuss about express routes when we get to AZ, um 104, which is the administrator. But for now, it's just for us to have an understanding of what the VPN does, and what's the type of the VPN, and what express route does, what's the difference, and the likes. Let me know if that answers your question. Any other question before we go ahead with what we have today? All right, so let's just continue since there is no question. If you have got any question, or if you have any question, or you remember anything along the way, just let me know. You can raise up your hand, or just unmute to ask your question. So now today we are going to be talking about storage. We started discussing those services in Azure. We started with compute last week, where we were able to talk about virtual machines and some other virtual machine options, where we'll talk about the virtual machine skill set. We gave an example of JAMP environment leveraging on, let's say, machine to host their application. Back then, when there is a lot of traffic or a lot of requests coming into JAMP environment, maybe when they release those JAMP results, then there will be problem because the traffic coming in is more than what the machine, or what the hosting, whatever they are using for hosting, could actually take at that time. So leveraging on VMSS, which is the virtual machine skill set, it gives you that leverage to be able to scale out when needs be, yeah, or if need be. So there are other options also, other compute options, where we talked about container instances, container Kubernetes instance. I just gave you a simple description of all these. We are going to really look into that when we get to the AZ400, which is the Azure DevOps. But I think we are still going to talk about it in the AZ104 course also. But for now, the description is enough, because this is just the fundamental class, just for you to have at least know about it. When someone says anything about, oh, what are some of the virtual machine options, or what are some of the compute services, you can also mention some of them. Yeah. So we talked about the availability set. How do we, some of the benefits of Azure, or some of the benefits of leveraging on cloud was availability, or is availability, high availability. Some other benefits which we discuss, scalability, reliability, and the likes. How do we now make sure that, or how does Microsoft make sure that all those services within Azure environment that you as an individual or the company wants to leverage on is always available? you know so let's say you are leveraging on, or you have virtual machine enabled or spin up within your environment. How does Microsoft makes these virtual machine available to everyone that that have actually created those virtual machine? So we'll be talking about high availability, and how does Microsoft make these machine available by leveraging on some options like availability set. We talk about the fact that what is being done is to replicate your machine in on different servers. So if you leverage on availability set, we have those machine replicated on different servers. Like, so there we talked about the default domain, we talked about the update domain, saying when you have a machine, or when you have some machines on the same rack, they're actually restarted at the same time. Or when you have machines on different update domains, they're actually updated and restarted at the same time. No two force domains or update domains are restarted at the same time. The combination of update domain and force domain makes up what we call the availability set. We also talk about some other components, Azure component, when we're talking about the architectural component in Azure, where I explained availability zones. Now, we are not even talking about you just deploying services or creating services within one particular data center or one particular zone. We're talking about you replicating, or making sure that your services are actually replicated in different zones, still within the same region. Another way to make sure that your services are available to you is to leverage on region peer. So we talked about all these. Now, moving away from that, let's start with storage. I'm so sure everybody at one point in time has actually used storage. Google Drive is a typical example. However, what has been provided to us is only the platform. A platform where we can save our file, a platform where we can actually save, our folders or create folders within. I've seen people using, a Google Drive to host their application. When you don't care about the custom domain, when you don't care about anything, I'm so sure sometimes maybe you had an interview and they say, okay, before we go ahead to set up an interview with you, we want you to record a 5 minutes video and upload it on Google Drive and send us the link. A platform has been created for you where you can actually upload those files, those videos, those images. And now we are now going to be talking about the fact that, what if you are the one managing this? Because when you leverage on Google Drive, you only have 15 gig of data. You are not the one managing it. Someone can delete your data from the back end. Someone can, when you want more space, let's say you've consumed the 15 gig that has been assigned to you, it's either you're paying, deleting, or creating additional Google account, which will give you additional 15 gig. Now, all these 15 gig that have been allocated, it's something that is being done from the back end. So let's now look at how this is being done. Let's now look at the technology that is supporting that kind of service you are leveraging on, which is Google Drive. So in Azure, Azure has got like the same technology also. I'm so sure some of us leverages on OneDrive also, which is like Google Drive alternative. So if you leverage on OneDrive, if you have, let's say you're leveraging on Office 365 product, you might have access to OneDrive also. So let's talk about storage accounts, and let's see how the technology or that service actually works. So what are we going to be talking about? um, this, we are going to be comparing the Azure storage services that we have. We are going to be describing the storage service tier. We are going to also describe the redundancy option. Now, when we talk about redundancy option, what are some of the options to make sure that our services, our storage account, our storage services are always available to us? Now, we'll describe the storage account option and account type. Then we identify options for moving files, from our storage account, be it moving it to an on-premise machine within Azure, or some other services within Azure or on our on-premises environment. Then we look at how do we migrate, you know, um, our storage. It might be, let's say you've got like a storage on your on-premises. You store some items on your hard drive on your on-premises machine. How do you migrate it to Azure? So we look at Azure Migrate and Azure Data Box. So let's take a look at some of what we have. So when we talk about storage accounts, we all know what storage accounts will be. Even the storage, yes, we use it to store, maybe files, folders, structured data, unstructured data. When we start talking about the type of storage account that we have, we'll start talking about, you know, if we'll be talking based on what they store. If they store unstructured data like video, like images, or they store structured data like table. Let's say we have um, 30 students in a class and we want to store their data. When we get information from them, we are going to get like a specific information for them, like their name, their date of birth, class they are in, school they are from, their city. Those are structured data. So we are going to be talking about those storage type based on these classifications. So we have storage accounts. When you leverage on storage accounts now in Azure, you must make sure that the name of your storage account are globally unique. Why? Because storage account comes with what we call the URL, like a domain. Now, for each storage account, just like you have it within your Google Drive, now there is always a link to your storage account, to your Google Drive, which any other person cannot have that same link. That is why when you're creating your Gmail account or you're creating your Yahoo account, they will tell you someone else has picked this username, because there is something that needs to make that particular Google Drive unique. And that's the same way, the storage account works. So storage account always have, because when I want to give you access to my storage account, I want to send it like a link to you. So there is something that needs to differentiate it from what Balawan have or from what Namdi has. So storage account name needs to be unique. So it provides access over the internet. That's why it has to be unique. And you have to determine the storage account services and the like. There are a lot of options when it comes to storage accounts, but based on the classification I've actually mentioned it before, we'll be classifying those storage accounts very soon. Now let's talk about redundancies before we even get to the type of storage account that we have in Azure. Now, we have different ways to make sure that our storage account is always available to us. Now, you can see the redundancy options that we have in Azure. We have the LRS, which we call the locally redundant storage, the ZRX, the GRX, and the GZRX. I'm going to be explaining this. Just forget about all these technical jargons that you can see on the screen. But let me just explain this. Now, the last time we talked about regions, we talked about availability zones. When you leverage on LRS, which is the locally redundant storage configuration type that we have. We are talking about the fact that you want to create your storage or your account within one particular data center in a region. And when we talk about this storage account, we are still going back to something like maybe the SSD where you store, so don't look it as if it's a different service. It's just like your HDD or SSD where you store your files and folders. So that's one type of, you will see Azure disks. We call those Azure disks. You will see that we are still going to talk about when we get to the options or the types of storage account that we have. Now, you've created your storage account, and if you remember when I was talking about the availability zones, I made mention about the fact that, let's say we take Nigeria as a region, and in Nigeria we've got different zones. We have the southwest, or let me even put it this way, let's say we have the west, the south, the north, and the east. Let's put it that way, that we have 4 regions in Nigeria. Now, on the west side we have Lagos, we have Ibadan, or your state. Let me use the state. We have Ogun State. All those are still within the west. Now, all those are referred to, or if I create different data centers in all those states, we still have just one particular zone. Now, one data center in one particular city, when you leverage on the locally redundant storage configuration type, that means I'm only going to be creating my storage in Lagos data center, and it's not replicated in any other place. You know what that means? Is if there is a downtime in Lagos, my storage account will not be available to me. Why do you want to leverage on this? So we move away from there and we go to the zone redundancy. We talked about the zone now. We've talked about the zone. We've talked about, let's say, the southwest, the southeast, the north central. All these are zones. Now, I do not just want to have my data center in one particular, my storage account in one particular zone, which is the southwest zone. If the southwest, what if, all the services in southwest goes down? That means we will not even have access to our storage account. Why not have it in the eastern part? Why not have it in north central? So I'm not just replicating or creating my storage account within the western part. Now I want to copy those, I want to replicate them to different zones. Now, replicating them to different zones, meaning I have my storage accounts copied and backup, or have a secondary option for ease. In the eastern part, I have a secondary option also for it, or tertiary option for it in the northern part. That means if there is an issue with the data centers in the southern part, it will not still affect my storage account. I will still be able to access the one in the eastern part and also the one in the northern part. But they are all still within a particular region, because you know that combination of your availability zones makes up what we call a region. What if the national grid collapses and there is we do not have access to our storage account or to services within the region? Then we will still not have access to our storage account. In that case, we might want to leverage on what we call the geo-redundancy storage configuration, where we have just one single data center. Now, in this case, now what I say is this one is LRS plus ZRX, where you have your locally redundancy storage configuration, which is one single data center, not the whole region now. And you now have that same storage account replicated in a different region. We just talked about Nigeria being a region. where I explained that we can have different zones in Nigeria. Now think of Ghana, which is a neighboring country to Nigeria, as another region. It also has its own zones, but because they are 300 miles away, we have them as region peer. So I want to keep my storage account or create my storage account in a primary data center in Lagos, but I want to replicate that storage account in Accra. In that case, you are leveraging on the geo redundancy option. The last one being the geo zone redundancy, which I would say is ZRX plus LRS. Now, ZRX in the sense that 3 availability zones in your region. Now, what you do, this one is you having trust issues. You have your storage account created in Lagos. Within that particular region, you've replicated it to Southeast, maybe in Anambra. Then you replicated it to a data center also in Abuja. Now you have it in 3 different zones, but you are still not stopping there. You still want to have it in a data center in Accra. So now what you've done is you've created like a ZRX configuration within the primary region. Now you've now added an LRX configuration within the secondary region. So you have 3 availability zones plus 1 data center in another region. So let me know at any point in time. Please do let me know if you want me to go back to anything or you want me to, explain more on a particular, topic. Moving away from that, let's start talking about what are some of the storage services that we have. This is where we start talking about the different services that we have based on the file type that they store. I talked about HDD, SSD, which are used with machines. It might be our laptop, or it might even be the virtual machines. With this type, we have a service we call the Azure Disk, which is used, to provide disks for machines, other services. But when you leverage on, or when you create a virtual machine in Azure, or when you even buy that your laptop, from wherever you buy it from, it comes with HDD or SSD, and that's the same type of storage that we have in Azure. And what type of service does that use or leverage it on? That is the Azure Disk. So that's the one you can see. But when it comes to storing unstructured data, I've talked about the fact that you want to store video, music, text. All those data do not have, there's no structure. So when it comes to that, we leverage on what we call the Azure Blob. So if Spotify starts using Azure today, if Netflix start using Azure today, they will leverage on the Azure Blob, because that is used to store massive amount of unstructured data. You can see such as text, binary data, and the likes. Moving away from that, let's go to Azure Queue. Let's say we have 2 applications that are like connected together, maybe via components. They're sharing components, they are interacting with each other. Those or let's say 2 components within an application, they are sharing, messages, just to make sure that that application works seamlessly. Now, to make this works better, to allow those components share those information, would leverage on what we call the Azure Queue. And that's why you can see, what does it do? It does message storage service, and this is used to provide large amount of messages. You can see large amount up to 64 KB. So majorly is being used, to allow components, application components interact together. The next one is the Azure file. And also, this can also be used to store unstructured data. However, the main thing is for us to use this one to set up what we call like the file share, the network file share. Now, I'm so sure some of us might have worked in an organization where when we create like your machine, or when we set up your machine, we'll map a particular space, storage space to that particular machine. Now that storage space is not on that particular machine. So that's, you keep storing there, but let's say there is an issue and that machine got lost, or you were robbed, or something happened to the machine and is kind of misplaced, and you're given another machine. Literally, you are supposed to lose everything on that particular machine because you lost the machine already. But because this is actually created or set up in a network space, or is actually shared on that particular machine, it doesn't reside on that machine, it's just shared. Now, when you get a new system and you put in your database, your username, password, you will see that you get those information back, because those, or that particular space, or that particular file, or folder was actually mapped to your credentials, and so it goes everywhere with you, even when you are not on that primary system, on that primary machine. Every machine that you get and you put in your system, your username and password, you are just going to get everything back. Also, you can actually use it to have this network file share, where within the organization, we just want to have something in one location. Majorly, when we set up the file share, that particular storage, it might be on a particular server, but everyone is able to connect to it regardless of what system or machine you are working with. It's kind of public within the organization. Everyone can access it. The other people cannot access what you have on your machine, but because if you put that particular file, if you put that particular folder on a network, every other person that have access to that particular network will be able to access those files also. And that's what we use the Azure file for. The last one, which is more like database, it's used for storing structured data. Now, I talked about structured data. I gave an example the other time, saying, let's say we have people in a particular class. Now we need information about those persons. We need those information, maybe their names, their city, where they come from, or how far is their place from school. We need those information. So those information, because they are structured, they come in the format where, okay, those are personal information. These are names, they are KPI information or something. But they are structured. They are not like music that don't really have any format. You can decide to put in anything. So that's what we use the Azure table for storing. So we use them for storing structured data. So these are services in Azure. You would see, but the good thing is when you create a storage account in Azure, all those services, you can see them on that particular storage account. It all depends on what you want to leverage on. Which one do you want to use? It now depends on which one you want to use. But you'll see when we start talking about, or when we start doing the practical session. And that's why I want us to finish up the old 900 today, and next week will be for practical session. I mentioned the other time saying, one of the reasons why your storage account is unique is because it comes with an endpoint with a URL. So for every storage account that you've created, you need to access it, maybe via the internet. Same way your Google link will always come, or Google Drive will always come with an endpoint. So if you record anything and you want to share it with me now, you need to at least create a link or share a link where you've uploaded that particular file. And that file or that link is what I will be using to access that particular file. So that's an endpoint. That's the same way services, storage services in Azure comes with endpoints. So you can see the blob storage has got like an endpoint, data lake, Azure files, queue table, and like they all got endpoint. The only difference is the fact that you can see the prefix after your storage name or storage account name is going to be different. If you are leveraging on Azure files, it's going to be your storage account dot file dot core dot windows dot net. If you are leveraging on blob storage, which is used for storing unstructured data, you have your storage account dot blob dot core dot windows dot net. You can see the only difference is the blob, the table, the queue, and and so on. So, however, before I move away from here, you can decide to have a custom domain. Instead of having blob.core.windows, if I can decide to go and get babafemi.com, and when I create a storage account, my storage account will now be, what's the name of the storage account? Blobstorage.babafemi.com. Now I'm not leveraging on blob.core.windows.net. I've created a storage account, but do not worry yourself about that, the custom domain for now. Like I said, this is more of we just scraping what we have in Azure. We will get there soon. Tiers. Storage account has got different services. There are different types, but there's what we call the tier also. When it comes to storage account access tier, we are talking about how frequently do we need to access those files. If those files, let's say we have backup files, we know that when anything we call backup, we are just saying in case there is an issue, let's just have it somewhere. Or there is a file that says, oh, let's say someone from the financial team now, and we have it as maybe the invoice or something, or whatever salary file, or we only need that file maybe once in 30 days. We do not need to store that file as auth because it's not accessed every day. So when we leverage on the auth tier, basically they are used for or within applications. If there is a need for us, let's say you have this structured data that you've stored within the Azure table. We know that students can decide to log into their portal to get their information every now and then. So they need that frequent access. So when we want to leverage on it, because when you're setting up your storage account, these are options that you need to put into consideration. So for an application that accesses the storage account every day, maybe because users need to get their information every now and then we'll just set the access level to we'll set the access level to I'm so sorry. I can see people saying there is no sound again. What's going on? Just give me a minute. There is no. Not even like on my YouTube. On my YouTube, and I just want to be sure before if this was like the same thing that happened the last time. I'm so sorry. Give me some minutes. Let me just quickly confirm. maybe it's time for me to go and get like a different. Oh, that's true. Yeah. So that's what. So what's going on? But that's LinkedIn, right? That's LinkedIn. Okay, YouTube. Give me a minute. I'm just going to quickly change that. Let's see. Yeah, I think it should be good. Yeah, it should be good. Yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you. I just needed to. I don't know. I don't know what's happening, and unfortunately, I'm not recording on YouTube today. I'm not recording it on Teams today.
The background is playing those people. So
Yeah, I know. Just give me a minute. I just quickly want to finish this up. All right. Okay, so let's just continue from where we stopped. So I was talking about the fact that no, I was talking about the fact that it all depends on how frequent these your files, folders stored within the storage account are being accessed. That's when you know the kind of access there that you want to leverage on. So if you have an application that needs to have access to your storage account every now and then, so you start leveraging on auth. So that's for frequent, frequent access. So when your stored data are accessed frequently, then you leverage on, the auth access tier. But if it's something like an example I just gave, like an infrequent access, but for files that need to be accessed at least within 30 days, then you can leverage on the cool type of access tier. The code gives you more time. It's also for infrequent access, but for files that you don't need within 90 days. The last one, the archive, which is more like backup. Okay, you want to have something there, you rarely access them, you just want to store them, and you now put it on, access type because you don't want to access them or you won't even access them within 190 days. Now, if it's a file that needs to be accessed frequently and you set it on archive, the cost or whatever you will be paying will be reduced as against when you use or leverage on the alt type of access tier. However, there will be latency. That particular file that you want to access, it will keep dragging because you have not set it to the kind of access tier needed for that particular access. So you need to be sure before you check an option. So I've seen people say, okay, why not put it on code? Though we need it once in 30 days. If you do that, you put it on code and you access that file within 30 days, you are going to be charged. I think that will be an additional charge for you because you've not you did not follow the guidance or the guidelines, or how will I put it? You broke like an agreement. So you are going to be charged. There will be a additional charge for you accessing that particular file before when has been set up on there. So you need to be sure of how frequent you are going to be accessing that particular file or folder before you even set up the access tier. I think the last one that we have in here. Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, so there is an exercise for this one also where we are asked to create a storage blob. Basically, it's just for us to be able to create or put in some files or some unstructured files which we can actually access and send the link. So you will see the way this works is just like we uploading to our YouTube, to our Google Drive, and now sending out the endpoint, which is the link. So most times you might not hear me talk about URL or link. Once I mention endpoint, just know that I'm talking about that www.google.com. So that is Google endpoint. So sometimes you all need to just learn those particular technical jargon. All right, so we talked about the fact that, let's say you have files on your on-premises environment. How are you going to move everything to the cloud from on-premises? So you can leverage on what we call the Azure Migrate. The Azure Migrate is not just for storage account. You would see people, they will say, or if you have seen it on LinkedIn, some people, they say they want an architect that have experience with migrating applications from on-premises to the cloud, or they want architect that can migrate their data from on-premises to the cloud. So Azure has given us, or have made a service available to you, which we call the Azure Migrate, which you can actually use in migrating your services, your data, your application from that on-premise environment to the cloud. So what it's going to do is there will be like an assessment of how much data you have in there. Then there will be a recommendation of what we can actually use, like what you can actually use, what kind of service can you leverage on, what's the amount of or disk space you want, and what's the type of or services in Azure that you can actually use to store that particular data. So that is what the Azure Migrate does. So it's not just for migrating your data, it's also for migrating application and the likes. Same thing, for the Azure Data Box, basically is actually used, to protect your data in case of, when you're actually transiting. So it's used for disaster recovery also, to Azure. So when you're using your Azure Migrate to migrate your data, maybe from Azure to a remote location or from on-premises to the cloud, we want to have the data box that serves as like a backup to make sure that your data are not lost in transit. So when you're moving that data from on-premises to the cloud, or moving from Azure out to any other services, you can actually leverage on the Azure Data Box just as a backup service to make sure your data are not lost. So you can see it stores up to 80 terabytes of data, up to 80 terabytes of data. The last one for storage account, which we are going to be talking about, will be what are some of the file management options that we have. And when we talk about the file management option, I'm talking about how can you access data within, or access those files stored within your storage account. You can see, let's start with the one in the middle. Pretend as if you are not seeing the one on the left. Let's start with the one in the middle. Now, the same way on your Windows machine or your Windows laptop, where you have File Explorer or Folder Explorer, I don't know what is even called, Now, when you go on there, you can access your downloads, your documents within your files, your documents stored on your desktop. We call it File Explorer. So once you click on it, you can start looking at those files, regardless of where you store them within your environment. You can have the same thing from that Azure environment. You can have it on your system also by leveraging on what we call the Azure Storage Explorer. So it's just you having like a different, just the same way you have the File Explorer on your machine, you can create the Azure Storage Explorer also. And what this will do is, once you click on it, you can start accessing all those files that you store within your storage account within your Azure environment. So the same way you have it, you have that file explorer works for you. That's the same way the storage account explorer will work for you. You will see all these, we will see all these when we get there. We were talking about having file share the other time, saying, okay, even if you lost your system, or even if something happened to your system and you get a new system, you are able to put in your username and password, then all your files are back. What makes that files come back to you? So here we talk about the file sync. There's something we call the file sync. It synchronizes everything that you have, maybe from your Azure environment, from your on-premises, back to that particular system. So we have the Azure file sync, which is used to synchronize Azure and on-premises files in bi-directional way. So you can actually push data within your on-premises environment. And when we talk about this on-premises environment, we are talking about files on your machine. Let's say you want to store your files, in the cloud now, or within the storage account you've created in Azure on your system, because you feel like, oh, this system might crash at any point in time. Why not save it in a remote storage account, which I will always have access to it regardless? The only thing I need is just the internet to be able to have access to it. So you can have what we call the Azure file sync, which will help you to copy, or move all this file from your machine to the cloud. And that's why, when I talk about the on-premise, just know that I'm talking about, a machine that is not within the Azure ecosystem. It might be a machine that you manage. It might be, a server within your office environment. Just the on-premises machine. And synchronizes files within that storage account you've created in Azure back to that your on-premises machine also. So all those things, when you leverage on the Azure file share, you'll be able to. The last one, which is the easy copy, which is why this is why I said you should pretend as if you're not seeing it. This is you leveraging on like a PowerShell script to be able to manage those files. To be able to sync those files from your Azure environment to the on-premises, and that's why you can see it as one direction synchronization. You cannot sync from on-premises to the cloud using the easy copy, but you can sync from the Azure environment to your on-premise machine. So you can copy the blob of files. When we talk about blobs, just know, we talk about blob storage, which is one of the service type that we have in Azure. Blob is nothing, it's just your file, that image you stored. Any unstructured data that you store is called a blob. So don't be, or don't get confused. So when we talk about the blob storage, that video, that music, that .mp4, whatever, .mp3, that text, that image, that picture that you stored is what we refer to as blob. So now is you leveraging on PowerShell script or a command line to manage those files. So I'm so sure this should not be a problem. Let's move away, and this will be the last part, in this particular, or let's say this will be the last module in this particular part that we're talking about, which we have the identity, access, and security. This is one of the most important one, or the important services that you really need to understand. But forget about all these things. These are just technical jargons that they put together. Identity, access, security is still the same thing. When we talk about identity, let's start from identity. What's an identity in Azure? Now, that your username and password that you use in accessing your Gmail environment is referred to as an identity. So what is your identity in the cloud? What is your identity in Azure? So that application that you have created and you are using to access, your Azure environment on your behalf is referred to as identity. So that your username and password, like I said, that credential, that combination of your credential is referred to as identity. Now, for you to be able to access any of your environment, your Gmail, you need your identity. Gmail needs that identity. That's So when you have that identity, that is when you can now have an access to the environment, and that's why you can see identity, access, and security. In a way to make sure that our environment is secure, that's why we require an identity for you before you can access the environment. So, like I said, these are just technical jargons. Shouldn't take you time to really understand. Within this particular part, we are going to be talking about directory services in Azure. What do we use, or what services do we use in managing identity? We'll talk about different identity objects. User is an identity object, but the others, we'll get to talk about them very soon. Just pretend as if you're not seeing some of these terms. Identity and Microsoft Entra ID, Microsoft Entra domain services. What are these ones? But we'll get there. So we describe different authentication method. I'm so sure most of these you've used it at one point in time. People will say, "Oh, for you to prevent people from overtaking your WhatsApp account, create a two-factor, 2FA." And they say, "Oh, you can use a password, to at least have additional authentication method." Then that's what we call multi-factor authentication. Sometimes you want to sign into maybe your Facebook or some other environment, and you put in your username and password. And what the system will say is, "Yes, I understand. You own the username and password. Yes, I get it. But we have sent a link, or we have sent, a text or a code to that email that you registered your account with, or you sent a code to that phone number that you registered your account with, especially when we access some of our bank apps, and they say put in that code." What they are doing there is a multi-factor authentication process. You putting your username and password will refer to it as a single factor authentication. It's a single factor. But when there is another layer of authentication, so I've started talking about authentication. What rubbish? Now, what do we even refer to as authentication? When you try to access something, would say you want to authenticate. So if you hear me talking about authentication, just relate it back to, oh, when I want to access this particular email, when I want to access this thing, I want to authenticate. So that's why I was explaining, two-factor authentication. Now you can see some other things there. Single sign-on, SSO. What is this one? But let me just quickly talk about it. Now, my organization has created two different applications. Now, I've got only one username and password. When I log into my system, I can use that same username and password to log into our financial platform within that particular environment. Or I can use that username and password to log in to another application my organization has created. I do not need to always create a different username and password, to be able to access. A typical example, let me see, it's your Gmail, your Google link, Google Photos. You do not need different username and password. Once you log into Gmail, that same identity is what you are using on Google link or on Google Photos. That same identity is what you are using on Google Drive. So when you log in on one, you don't need to still put in username and password when you want to use Google Drive. No, it will just load, it will just give you access. That's what we call single sign-on. So a sign-on to one is a sign-on to all. That's the best one. So that's what we refer to as single sign-on. Now, the last one is passwordless. I've explained a bit of this, but how does that actually works? In passwordless, I do not want to create username and password. I only want to have username, and every time I want to log in, a code will be sent to my phone. That code is what I will put in. So what is happening there is I do not have password, I have username, but there are other ways to confirm it's me. So that's passwordless. Then we'll go ahead to talk about external identities and guest user or guest access in Azure. So what does this mean? What is this used for? I have an organization like I've created in Nigeria, but I do not want to build or have a building in Nigeria because I'm not from Nigeria. And we can take our business anywhere or at any point in time. Or I even have an organization. We have a building, which is what or the building belongs to us, but we will not thought of it. Our staff comes all the way from Egbeda, Iyanopaja, Ikorodu to the island. We cannot buy 200 coastal buses just to move our staff from all these locations every day. But there is a company called Shotlabs. What they do is they look for organizations that need help with logistics and they partner with them. So when you have two organizations partner together, and you are like, okay, I'm just going to delegate these logistic services to you guys. You guys will be helping me. Then you'll be part of our organization. Or you can just send two of yourself to our organization. We'll give them an office. And anytime any of our staff have issues with logistics, they come to those staff. Those staff are in the organization as if they are part of the organization, but they are from different organizations. They are external to our organization. So we call them external identity, or we call them guest access within our environment. So we are in collaboration with a different organization, but we still have them within our organization. Then from there we'll look at some of the technologies or some of the services in Azure. A typical example, this was a question that was asked last week, which was, what happens when we try to log into let's say Revolut from Nigeria, and it says this particular application is not accessible in your country. What's happening? What has happened is Revolut has set up what we call conditional access to say this particular location, if anyone is trying to access from there, please do not give them access. So there is always a condition to that particular access. So if those conditions are not met, then it's either that particular access is denied or allowed based on the criteria that has been set up in there. So when you leverage on conditional access, we use this. It might be based on location, it might be based on the type of phone you are using to access. And that's why you might see at some point, you see organizations sending out mail that if you are still using iPhone 7, very soon, or this particular operating system, you will not be able to access this particular application. You need to upgrade to this to be able to. So what they've done is they've set up some conditions in there to say if this condition is not met, please do not allow access. Then from there we'll move to what we call the role-based access control, which is the RBAC, where what we're trying to do is, yes, you have username and password. We talk about authentication, and this identity, this username and password of yours is what you use for authenticating into that particular account. There is a different term that we call authorization. Now, let me tell you how the authorization works. Let's say I work for Jumia. I'm a Jumia staff, you are a Jumia customer. We are going to be logging in into the Jumia app. But what I'm going to be seeing is going to be different from what you are seeing. Because I'm a staff, I'm authorized to see some parts within that particular application which you don't have access to. Maybe the total numbers of orders, in that day from all customers. Summary of how much we've earned, maybe in profit for that particular day. But you, the only thing you're going to be seeing is your own dashboard. You're only going to see your own order. You're only going to see your own payment method, but you are never going to see the ones for the other customers. Because the access that has been given to you, or the authorization that has been, given to you, it's only for what you need it for. So there are roles in Azure also, depending on what you need to do, will give you a role based on what you need to do. If it's for you to be able to read this text, but we do not want you to be able to delete it, we only give you what we call the reader role. If it is for you to be able to delete, if there is a role called deleter role or deletion role, we'll assign it to you. Stuff like that. So it all depends. Then from there we'll move on to what we call concept of zero trust. Zero trust. I just mentioned Revolut. Revolut says customers that travels to Nigeria, should not access our application. And you now say, oh, okay, don't worry. When because we know you are the son of CEO, when you go there, or let's say we'll allow people to access, but we need multi-factor authentication when they want to access from that particular application. But because you are the son of the CEO, don't worry, when you go there, you do not need multi-factor authentication. You can just do single-factor authentication and you are in. No. So the zero trust, regardless of who you are, regardless of even if you are the CEO of that company, you go through the same process someone that doesn't even have any share within that organization will go through. That's zero trust. We don't care. So, and that's a very good, security posture. And from there, we'll move on to what we call the defense in depth. For every layer, let's say you want to access application now. Application doesn't just start from, your access is not just from that particular application. There are a lot of services you will have access to get to that application. There are a lot of things you will have gone through. You will sign in, maybe username and password, to access your bank. From there, you access the network layer. From there, the security layer, all the way the data, the application layer before you even get to see the data that is stored within that application. So for every layer of that particular application, there's always a defense, and that's what we call defense in depth model. And the last one we'll talk about Defender for Cloud. Don't worry. This is just like a tool, that scans all the resources within your environment and provide like a security recommendation, based on what you have in there. Let's just quickly go to all this. Any question before I go ahead? Anything? There are a lot of information, too much of information. But don't mind me. But we just need to give it out. Okay. Silence means no. Let's start with Enter ID. Just pretend as if this is nothing. But one thing I need to tell you is, for every organization, for every account created in there, we represent them as an organization. So your organization will only have a virtual account. So let's say Google joined Azure now. Google will have an organization created within the Azure environment. So what we say is they've created an Enter ID tenant. Do you understand? So for every organization, there is always like a tenant for them. So this Microsoft service is what is used when it comes to identity and access management. That's Microsoft Cloud Identity and Access Management. We have talked about the identity. We've talked about the fact that your credentials makes up your identity. And after then, you need to access. We talk about authentication. When you want to access anything, we say, oh, you want to authenticate. And when you have accessed that particular application, now what you can see depends on what we have authorized you to see. I just give an example of Jumia. Me being a staff, you being like a Jumia consumer or Jumia app consumer. So now let's talk about authentication, which are some of the services under this Microsoft Enter ID. Now, authentication, we talked about it already. Single sign-on, I talked about it already. I use Google Apps as an example. Access to one is access to all. Application management within the Azure environment. These URLs that you can see, there is always an application. You will get there, but not the normal application that you know. Within the Azure environment, there is what we call the app registration, where you can create like a dummy app. But this dummy app, you need to add an endpoint. What this does is the one controlling the authentication to that particular application. So when you want to access anything, you see that thing that is asking you for username and password. There is an application that is controlling that authentication. So within there, you will talk about the app management. Then we go to business. Everything we've explained it. I explained it during the external, when I was talking about the external identity. When I said, you have a company, you give out the logistic part of that company. That's business to business. Then the last one, which is the device management. I'm so sure it's now getting tougher. It's getting tougher, right, guys? No one is talking. What's going on? You guys did not join from YouTube. It's getting interesting. Okay, nice. I love you guys. I love you guys. Let's go. But you guys should know that at some point I will start asking my own questions also. I'm saying all these ones. When I start asking my questions, I will keep quiet and you guys will be saying whatever you need to say. So if you have any question at any point in time, always let me know. Please. That's why we are here. It's getting interesting. I swear. I know. Okay. Let's talk about it. Now, that's device management and the likes, when we get to device management, I'm so sure some of you might have heard of Intune, and the like. So we'll talk about all this, when we get to Enter ID. There is, in the security course, I think we do more Enter ID than any other thing, identity management. Yeah. Domain services. Enter ID domain services. How can I explain this? Yeah. So back in the days when we were doing that, when we were this proud IT analyst or system administrator that we put out of band to non-IT guys, there is something that we work on that our server. We call it domain services. That domain services is where we create users, we create applications, we create files, all those file mapping I was talking about the other time. And imagine you come to the office and you are not able to log into your system. You put in your username and password and it's not working. You say, it's the same username and password that you used yesterday. Say, go to the IT. And you come over to the IT and they say, have you seen HR today? Have you talked to the HR today? No one came to your system. No one came to your system. The only thing we did was to change your username and password. To change your password from our server. Because that server connects to all the client system. That your system is a client system. So we can manage that device from our server. we call it Active Directory. Active Directory. So that service is used to control, for device management, for user management, and the like. So that's the same place we will create your username and password, and we'll say, go and try this. On next logon, it will tell you to reset, your password. You understand? Now, all those stuff now, instead of having it on our server, because there is no server again, it has now been delegated to Microsoft. Microsoft has now created a service called Microsoft Entra Domain Services that does the same thing. So instead of you creating your own, you can leverage on this managed one. So this is a managed domain service, just like the same one. So before I even finish, that story I was telling you that we will ask you to go back to your HR. That means you have been sacked because the IT, the tech guys have changed your password because HR said go and change it. So we use that AD to control everything. Now the managed one now is now in the cloud. Do you understand? So that is it. Compare authentication and authorization from there. Now, I was talking about authentication the other time. I said when you want to access one particular, or when you want to access a resource or an application using, you need your username and password. You need your identity. That's you. You need that credential, that legitimate credential to be able to access. That's what we call authentication. But what you can see is what we call authorization. What have you been authorized, to access? So we start very soon. You guys will start talking about terms like HTTP errors. Don't worry, HTTP errors. You start talking about, I'm so sure you've seen it before, error 401, error 403, error 500. We'll start talking about it. So you know if it's an authentication issue, if it's an authorization issue. So when you see error 401, you say, oh, it's authentication. Error 403, forbidden. Sometimes you see, forbidden error, you cannot access. Forbidden. What is forbidden? Authorization issue. Because, yes, we know you have this username and password, but whatever you want to access, you are not authorized to access it. So that's the part. That is where the authorization comes in. We need all this when we get to DevOps. You see errors and errors. So, but this gives you that troubleshooting knowledge. You know what you need to troubleshoot. When you see 500, don't worry yourself. It's not your application issue. It's server error. Anything 500, but anything 4 is application issue. So we'll get there. Just that's not part of this class, but keep it. So I'm not sure I've explained it, using the Jumia, and if you have any question, please do let me know. I'll just be moving on. We talk about the multi-factor authentication. I use WhatsApp as a multi-factor authentication. Username and password. Yes, we understand you have that username and password. You have logged in, but no. That text message, that code that we have sent to your WhatsApp, go and bring it before you can enter. So the first authentication method is the username and password. Yes, we've seen it, but you need, before you can log in, before you can access this particular application, put that code that we sent to you. That's the only way we will know that you have not been compromised. Yes. Sam, you cannot hide. I saw your hand the other time. Tell me. You just muted yourself. What's going on? Go ahead. Okay. Wow. Okay. You can. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's it. Thank you for even bringing me back. Sometimes we might not even call it authentication. We call it auth-n. When you see auth-n, is authentication. When you see Auth Z or what we call Auth Z, in our side, that's referred to as authentication. So you might go to an interview and say, "What's the difference between Auth N and Auth Z?" Just know you're talking about authentication. Funny enough, this is my job that I'm doing. I was asked this question. I was asked difference between authentication and authorization. So, so fundamental cannot be shied away from. Thank you. For yeah. So multi-factor authentication, we've done this one. B2B, I just said, you inviting guests, to your tenant. It might be vendor, it might be partner, it might be a supplier. Let's say you own shop, right? There are people delivering items to you. Oh, okay, when you sell it is when we give you the money. It's just as if you are just putting there, because of your own name, because of your own brand, you get those items, you put it on the shelf, because you do not want to be buying those items. You just feel like, okay, let's collaborate, and you bring in everything. So with partners, when you invite partners, vendors, or any other people to manage some part of your business, then you can leverage on the B2B. So you can invite those people and say, okay, we do not want security personnel, we do not want to and this is what bank does. We do not want to train security personnel and recruit them. Fine. There is Allogene. Let's just get people from personnel from Allogene Security. They stay within our organization. But when we want to pay them salary, we pay it to their company. Their company pays them. But they work with us. They stay, they have an office, but that's the same thing in Azure. We invite them, let's collaborate. We are marketing solution organization. We do not want to recruit any developer. But we go to Microsoft and say, Microsoft, you've got developers. We invite them, give us like 2 developers to work with us on this particular project. When they are done, they come back to you guys. So what we're doing is we just invite them as a guest to our tenant, pending the time they're working on it, and when they're done, they go back to wherever they come from. So that's how the B2B works. But when we start explaining it, it might not be like that. Another service, very nice service that we leverage on within the identity space is what we call the Azure B2C. We just talk about B2B as business to business. What's B2C? Business to consumer. I'm so sure you guys have seen this before. When you want to log into site like, I don't know, for me, like Real Madrid, but I'm so sure you would have seen it on most of this site. I've created an application, but I do not want users to start creating username and password, on my own application to access my application. Those users, I'm so sure they have Gmail account. Those users, I'm so sure they have Facebook account. They have Apple account. Why not bring your own identity? That username that you are using to access Gmail, you can use it to access my application also. That's why on that application, you will see sign in with Google, sign in with Gmail, sign in with Facebook. And what that does is when you click on Gmail, it takes you out of my application. It takes you to Gmail. Say, okay, put in your username and password. And when you're done, it redirects you back to my application. So what that does is business to consumer. I do not care about what's you creating username and password. You want to access my application. I know you are actually on some other applications that you're putting your username and password, like Facebook, like Apple. You can use that same login to access, so that you don't need to bother yourself about username, changing password, or what password did I use, to log into this application. Once you just click on that sign in to Google, it takes you to Google. You use the same Google. So if you forget your password, it will not be on me. You have to go and change it with Google. So because we are only using that IDP, which we call identity provider, to authenticate into my own application. That's what Azure B2C does. You see, the Azure B2C, I work with an organization as a B2C engineer for 1 year. So it's a very, very big technology, very, very big one. If you know this one, just this one, oh my word, you know money. Now let's move. We talked about conditional access. I gave an example of where Monolith, trying to prevent people from a particular location from accessing their application, or Wise, or what, some applications like that. Netflix is an example. Oh, they say, oh, there is this movie coming out, Jagun Jagun, but you cannot watch it if you are not in Nigeria. And people, what will do? They will do is, okay, let's go and create VPN. Someone mentioned this also last week. TikTok in US, TikTok and US. Now people cannot use TikTok in US. If they want to do that, they create a VPN, or they buy a VPN, to change their location to a location where TikTok is allowed. Same way we were using VPN when Twitter was banned in Nigeria then. You understand? Just to say, oh, okay, connect to Belgium, connect to US, so that you can use Twitter. So what they've done then is just to use a conditional access policy to prevent certain people from certain location or certain device or some users, some application, or if there is a leak detected. If you ever log in, I don't think bank does it again. Let's say you are on VPN, you just log into your GTB account, and within 5 minutes, you now connected your VPN. You are now showing US, from Nigeria. 5 minutes from Nigeria to US, then you log into that particular bank app again. It will lock you out. Same thing, LinkedIn will do for you. If you log into LinkedIn now, let's say you log in from a Nigerian IP, and after 2 minutes you're on VPN, maybe you want to go and watch Jago Jago, or you want to go and watch Lord of the Rings, you now connect VPN and say, okay, let me change it to US. You now change it to US. By mistake, you now went back to LinkedIn. That's what we call impossible travel. You can, even if you are, you cannot travel 5 minutes from Nigeria to US. So with that, we say the user is at risk. So we call it risk detection. Based on this, your account might be locked out, your identity might be locked out. So conditional access does all this. Role-based access control, I gave you an example of these. What we're saying is, instead of you just giving access to everyone, what do you do? What do you need access to? We only give you access based on what you need access to. We only give you access based on what you want. The authorization level is controlled using what we call the role-based access control. Zero trust. I just explained what the zero trust is like. What we're doing is, instead of we saying, oh, okay, because you are the CEO, that's the best way I can explain it now, but when we get there, you will see there will be more explanation. I think this should come up within the security and cybersecurity courses, where we say, okay, because you are the CEO, we say, no, let's reduce the number of authentication method you need to go through. All other person goes through 5 authentication methods, but you, because you are the CEO, please, you just go through maybe 2. No, it's zero trust regardless, because we don't even know if your account has been hijacked. We don't know if your account, has been compromised. So we won't give that liberty. We will not say, oh, because of this position you hold, would only allow you to go through this while the other goes through. No, it's a zero trust. We don't care who you are. Everybody needs to go through the same process to access our data. So that's just like the description I can actually give to this now. So that, but just have an understanding that this is what we are trying to achieve here. Defense in depth. I'm not going to use what we have on here to explain. I'm just going to explain using. Now, let's say I stay in an apartment, I stay in an apartment, and this apartment has got like 20 other apartments, you know, all within a building. Now, this building, let's say we have three other doors before you even get to my apartment. Then when you get into all these doors, you still need to access the lift. The lift also requires you to have like maybe your card to scan to go to the particular level you are going to. Before you can access, or let's even say you want to access, you want to come watch TV in our house, you need to get to the first door, which might be like the compound gate. You need to prove your access. Now, when you escape through that particular gate, you get to where the security are. You escape through that also. You get to where the lift is. You escape through that. When you get to my apartment, you need the key to be able to go in. When you even go in, you need permission to still turn on the TV. So all these are for every layer. Before you get to where the data is, there is always like a defense. There is always like a security. So you can see the main thing is for us to be able to access the data, which you can see. But the first thing will be you coming with your physical security, which is the system. The system will have its own, before you can access the system, the organization system, you need a username and password. You go in there, you access the system yourself, you go in there with your identity, there is a perimeter defense, maybe some VPN connection or something, or some things you need to authenticate before you even get. And when you do that, the network, you've been able to connect to the VPN, then maybe a compute where that particular application is being hosted, that will check, there might be conditional access there, saying, okay, you have been able to access all these things, but we have caught you. You are accessing from a country which is not allowed. You understand? But let's say you are even able to, you get to that application, then when you are finally able to, you have all those permissions, you have everything. That's the only time you can access the data. This thing happens within seconds, but there are a lot of things that are being checked. So that's what we call, defense in depth. There is a layer approach to securing, our data, to securing that computer system. So that's what we call the multi-level of protection. Multi-level of layer approach. So we call it defense in depth. Defender for cloud. So there is this tool which we call Defender for Cloud, and what it does is it scans all the resources that have been provided within the Azure environment, or that have been created within the Azure environment, or even your own premises, if you connect it together, and when it scans through, it's going to be providing security recommendations. It's going to be providing security recommendation. It's going to say, this user is at risk because it's accessing from this particular location. This user, or this virtual machine has got a public IP address. Virtual machines that are used within an organization to host applications should not have public IP address. So there are recommendations being provided based on what has actually been scanned within that particular organization. So it provides you, protection against threats, both for your on-premises services or machines and your Azure machines. Not only machines or services now. So you can see it analyzes and identifies potential attacks. It detects and blocks malware and provides security recommendation for you. So we call it Azure Defender for Cloud. And after that is where we stop. That's we completing the second module. Every time I feel like I'm going to finish this particular mode, is the 104 or 900. look as if we have more things added, because unfortunately I've still got one learning part to go. Oh my word. Oh my word. So let's see. Let me see how many. This one is not long, but we can't do it today. Learning part 3. So this one is just we are just going to be talking about cost. You can see it, but I won't want to rush this also, from behind, because these are very, very important also. Yeah, yeah. I think that is not too long. Oh, this is where we'll talk about that thing that you guys have been running for, those scripting. but don't worry, we just talking about it. We are not doing anything scripting for now, but we'll have to talk about. Just pretend as if you never saw it. Not only try. No, but the concept of this one is the bicep. Okay, let's stop here today. That means we still got one learning part to go before we even have our labs. Let's stop there for now. Any question you guys want to ask me? But I will make sure that we finish this up, that next week. And that's why this particular cohort is lasting for almost 8 months or 7 months. But it doesn't mean that you have to go through the whole 7 months. After the Azure administrator, you can decide to stop. If you don't want to do the security, the DevOps, the cybersecurity, the AI. But it's so important you do the Azure administrator, which is the wonderful. Not this one. This one is fundamental. We've not even started anything. All right. Any question from you guys? Any word? Anyone from the YouTube, the LinkedIn? Oh, this is like the best setup. The best set of students I have. They don't ask questions. Oh my word. You're so smart. I love you guys. All right. I'll call it a day then. If you guys have got no question, then we'll talk next week. That was late. Tell me. Don't think, hey. Okay. Yeah. It does make it does make sense. It does make sense. So like I said, when I was explaining, now there are some of the services that does like that stores like almost the same type of data. When we talk about the Azure files, when we talk about the blob also, they both store almost the same type, but we use the Azure files basically when we want to share those files, like when we want to leverage on, maybe when we want to share them on the network. Do you understand? Which is not possible with blob. But when you want to store large amount of unstructured data, then you leverage on blob as against the Azure file. In the sense that, let's say Netflix wants to start using Azure today as what they use in storing their movies. Do you understand? They do not want to use Azure files because they are not sharing it on the network though. They are not leveraging on share files. They just want to store those data, and to store large amounts of those data, you leverage on the blob. which are all unstructured. But when we talk about the structured one, which I gave you an example of, let's say you collecting personal information from students from a particular class, you do not want to use Azure File. So in this case, you use the type of storage account that is best or that suits that particular purpose. It doesn't mean the others cannot, store that kind of data also. But which services are actually best when you actually leveraging on that particular type of service? Does that make sense? Namdi, and not put everything in putting everything together. No. It's all together. Yes, it's all together. Those are just services. There is one particular service which we call the storage account. All these other services just falls under it. So when you look at the storage account, within the storage account is now where, let me see, it looks like intentionally I did not take you guys to the storage account, but it looks like your question will. So you would see how. Oh my word. I have so many. So I'm just going to quickly go to one of the storage accounts within my environment. So if I go to the storage account, I hope I still have. Yeah. So let's see. So from here, I can go to the data storage, and you can see the different types that we have. Do you understand? Now it all depends on if you want to leverage on the Azure queue, you want to leverage on the Azure blob. So for you, I talk about that those data, when you store them, we refer to them as blob. However, before you can start storing your blob, you need to create what we call the container. And that's why sometimes you might hear Azure container, storage, you understand, the table or the queue. So you can see all these services, they are just type of services within the storage accounts. Do you understand? Within the storage account. Yeah, Namdi, please. Remove the star. You might be older than me. You are even. Why am I even saying might? Yes, now we'll start it. So we're supposed to finish up the theoretical aspect. Yeah, even when people say, "Oh, why not just do the practical aspect only?" Yes, we can decide to do the practical aspect, but however, you're going to be missing out on a lot of those technical terms. Now, you can go to some interviews and they are just asking you those technical terms only. Do you understand? That's why. So, I hope we finish up this theoretical aspect next week. Then, if we do, then the upper week will be the practical aspect. We're going to do all the practical aspects. There are 6 labs there. In this particular course, we're going to go through all the labs. And the good thing is, when we get to administrator, I think administrator has got like 15 labs. We're going to do all the labs. Same thing goes with the security, the DevOps, and but believe me, when it gets to that time, and that's why I'm always asking you guys to ask questions. You guys will be the one to. One of you will share his or her screen, and we'll use that. You'll be the one to go through it. I will just be here explaining why one of you does. That sharing. So that doesn't mean you guys should not come to class, please. No problem. That's cool. Yes, that's. Don't give up. Don't give up on your dream. So the thing is, there are so many, and that's why I'm trying to go to different courses here. Now we're starting from administrator fundamental, because there's no way we can actually just shy away from it. So after this one now, we're going to be doing the administrator, which incorporates all those services. And from there, you can decide, oh, I want to go into security, cloud security. I want to be a cybersecurity engineer. I want to go into DevOps, or I want to become a cloud engineer. The good thing is we are also adding AI this year, and you want to become an AI engineer. I might not be able to provide you everything you need in this particular cohort, but I will give you that basic where you can actually leverage on. So there are lots of things you can actually do at the end of this particular cohort. But or let's say, however, the fact that I have these how would I put this? Or based on the MVP award that I have, so there is this course synchronization with Microsoft. Some of the Microsoft third party where when we finish training, we might be lucky to get some slots for internship for people that we train. Do you understand? And if that comes up, we just need to be ready, because there are a lot of people always fighting for that position, and that's why these trainings are always thorough, very thorough. Yeah. You keep putting hard. I tell you cannot hide, though. You rest up your hand already. Just unmute, though. You said? Only Saturdays. Good afternoon, boss. Who am I? So being job ready, coming to class only on Saturdays, we going through this PowerPoint. We not, give you that job ready. You also need to read. Do you understand? You also need to read. You also need to go through those links, because this one, I'm going through this PowerPoint. There are some things that will be missing for sure. That's why you also need to read. However, when we go to those labs, there are a lot of things we are going to be talking about, and you will notice that most of our courses, or most of our, when you finally get a job, those things you'll be doing are more related to what we are going to be doing in those labs. So I would say yes, you can go for an interview and pass with whatever we're going to be teaching you, especially when it gets to the administrator, because we're going through the course in depth, same goes with the security and, the DevOps. However, you also need to help us, you also need to put more effort. This is one thing I don't talk about anymore. When I was also learning, I used to wake up as early as 4 o'clock, 4:30, every day, just to catch up on, labs, read 2, 3 hours, But I'm not asking you to read 2, 3 hours. IT can be so boring, especially when you're just transitioning. Sometimes you just want to, but I always, advise people to do like maybe 30 minutes every day, just to replicate whatever we are doing, or just to read, some of the things we might actually miss in class also. So I believe you should be job ready, once we have finished the full course. However, you also need to put that effort, not just by coming to class, and when you're done with the class, you just close your laptop. Next week, Saturday, again, you join. You get. So as we are doing it there, please just put effort, on your side also. And we should be, I believe you should be already at the end of the day.
All right, so
I'm
I'm
just
just
going
going
to
to
stop
stop
sharing
sharing
my
my
screen.
screen.
I
I
believe
believe
we
we
can
can
call
call
it
it
a
a
day.
day.
We
We
meet
meet
on
on
Saturday.
Saturday.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.